Last week, Lippincott published its CMO Outlook 2026 study, and it was rough. If you're a CMO or you report to one, it probably reads like a disturbing diagnosis of your own work. Here's the gist. Under pressure from CEOs, marketing leaders are choosing short-term results over long-term brand building, mostly to earn credibility in the C-suite and up. Here we go. Only 28% feel they have a very high level of organizational influence. 84% say it's hard to align leadership around a shared marketing vision. Nearly 80% say bureaucracy regularly interferes with decision-making. Fewer than half feel marketing operates with any real autonomy. And 15% say they aren't even the top marketing decision-maker in their own organization. The CMO. Chief Marketing Officer, not the top marketing decision maker. Okay. If you feel a little seen, I feel a little seen or a little sad hearing that, you're not alone. At least 541 CMOs on 4 continents agree with you. But here's where I'm going to part ways with how everyone else is reading this data. The headlines say that CMOs are losing influence because they've gone too short term, that they've traded the brand building that earns long-term respect for the quick wins that keep them employed this quarter, this week, this month. The implied fix is be braver, make the long-term case, win the room. Sure, you cannot abandon long-term results for short-term wins, but I don't think that's the problem at all. CMOs aren't losing influence because they're too short-term. They're losing it because they're managing channels instead of running a system. They have a to-do list and activities, not an operating system. The Lippincott data is the symptom. The missing operating system is the cause. On this week's SpinSucks podcast episode, which, by the way, is our 400th episode, I'll show you the difference between the two, because once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it, and it changes how you think about your own work.
If you're a communications pro who works hard, doesn't compromise quality, and gets the job done, welcome home. We'll share our tips, tricks, and stories, and together we will change the face of PR. Spin sucks, but we don't. With the SpinSucks podcast, here's Gini Dietrich.
Welcome back to the SpinSucks podcast. I'm Gini Dietrich. Before we get started, I have a little tidbit for you. Did you know that if you can't finish watching right now, you can subscribe to the audio version of this show? We're on all of the platforms where you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple, or you can subscribe to our newsletter at spinsucks.com and receive it in your inbox every Tuesday morning directly from moi. Every think piece about the Lippincott study wants to relitigate the same fight: brand versus performance, long versus short term, the 60-40 rule versus this quarter's pipeline. It's a trap. And every single one of us walks into it. You cannot win a long-term brand argument inside a quarterly results room. The CEO who's getting squeezed by the board doesn't want to hear about brand equity compounding over 3 years. They want to know what marketing did to increase revenue in the last 11 days. So the CMO who shows up to that marketing meeting, or that CEO meeting, armed with a beautiful long-term brand case, loses. Not because the case is wrong, but because it's the wrong instrument in that room. And the CMO who caves and goes all in on short-term performance loses as well. Their loss is slower, but it is a loss just the same. Performance with no brand behind it gets more expensive every quarter, and eventually you're the person explaining why customer acquisition costs keep going up. So both sides of the debate lead to the same place. It's a marketing leader with no influence. The way out is not to choose a side, it's to stop choosing. The CMOs who actually have influence aren't winning the brand versus performance argument. They've made that argument irrelevant. They run a system that produces near-time proof and compounding authority from the same set of activities. They walk into a quarterly business review results room with this quarter's number and the asset that's going to make next quarter's number cheaper. Same work, Two completely different payoffs. That is not a personality trait. That is not someone knowing better than someone else. That is not even somebody being smarter than someone else. It's not executive presence. It's because they have an operating model. And unfortunately, most marketing departments don't have one. Think about how a typical marketing org is built. There's a content person, a PR person or an agency, a social team, a paid media manager, a demand gen lead, an events coordinator, an AEO specialist. Maybe there's even an SEO specialist who's hanging on for dear life. Every one of them is busy. Every one of them is producing, and almost none of it connects. They have a blog post that doesn't reference the research the PR team just placed. They have a webinar that doesn't feed the paid campaign. They have an earned media placement that lives and dies in a coverage report that nobody reads. They have a social team that's reacting to a trend, but the brand has no actual point of view on it. Everyone is working hard, and the whole thing produces a fraction of what it should because nothing compounds. This is what 84% it's hard to align leadership around a shared vision actually looks like on the ground. It's not that the CMO can't write a vision statement. It's that there's no system underneath the vision statement to make the pieces pull in the same direction. Without a system, alignment is just a meeting. With an operating system, it's how the work compounds, and it works while you sleep, which is even better. When you manage channels instead of running a system, you can't prove your value because value lives in the connections between channels, not in any single one. So you get the 28%, you get the bureaucracy, you get the 15% who aren't in charge of their own function anymore. Not at all because they're bad at their jobs, but because they can't show the C-suite a measurable machine. They can only show the C-suite their to-do list with activities. You do not earn influence by working harder inside a broken structure. You earn it by replacing the structure. And yet, CMOs are funneling investment into AI, as they should, while pulling money away from user experience, mobile apps, and loyalty. The study frames that as starving the infrastructure that protects you from AI disruption, which is true. But it's also worse than that. The owned infrastructure you're defunding, your website, your content, your structured data, your actual published expertise, is the exact thing that determines whether your brand shows up inside AI answers. When a buyer asks AI who is the best at X, the model answers from what it can find, trust, and cite on the internet. And what it finds is owned media, earned media, shared media. And if you're defunding that for short-term results, it's not going to find anything. The stuff a real recognized brand has published and said about it across the web is what's found. So if you've spent the last year cutting that to fund an AI initiative, you've done something genuinely backward. You've invested in AI in a way that makes you less visible inside AI. Only 12% of CMOs rate their tech enablement as excellent. Only 11% say their organization is excellent at adopting new technology. Not surprising. So most of this AI spend is landing in organizations that just are not structurally ready to use it. And it's being paid for by gutting the one asset that earns visibility in the channel they're chasing. That is not a budget problem. That is an operating system problem. A company running a marketing operating system would never make this trade because it would see that owned media is not a cost center to raid. It is the source of truth that everything else depends on it, including the AI bet. That is what visibility engineering is built to fix. Building owned media that both humans and machines can find, trust, and cite. So when that search happens on Google or inside an LLM, you are the answer. It's the long-term brand play and the get found today play fused, which is exactly the kind of two payoff move a CMO with influence makes. So if the problem is a missing operating system, you probably already know what you're missing. It's the PESO model, paid, earned, shared, and owned media. And the reason it solves the influence problem is that it was never meant to be 4 channels you run side by side. It's a system. And the system is what's going to save you both short and long term. Everything starts with owned media. Owned media is your foundation. It's your source of truth, your content, your research, your point of view, your website. It's the asset you control, the thing that AI cites, and the place where near-term proof, a piece that converts this week, and long-term authority, a body of work that compounds for years, are literally the same artifact. If you defund this, the whole system loses its center, which is precisely the mistake the studies caught CMOs making. Third-party credibility, media coverage, analyst mentions, the expert quoted in the trade media, a newsletter mention, a review, a podcast appearance. This is all considered the proof layer. It's what makes the owned media believable and what teaches the AI models that your brand is the one worth citing. Earned media without owned media to point back to evaporates. Owned without earned looks like marketing. Together, though, they look like authority. Shared media, then, is the distribution and intelligence. Social media is not a megaphone bolted onto the end. It's how earned and owned get distributed. We're also learning more and more every day about how LLMs learn, and some social media, Reddit and LinkedIn newsletters, for instance, is as important as earned and owned media. So we can't abandon those things either. It also helps you understand what your audience cares about so your next owned media asset is sharper. It's a two-way channel. Most organizations only use it in one direction, which is why their social feels like noise and why it doesn't typically result in much. And then paid is the accelerant. It's not the engine. You put money behind the owned, earned, and shared that is already working to make it go faster and reach further. When paid is the strategy, you're renting attention you'll lose the second the budget stops. When paid amplifies a system, you're compounding something you own. Then you have integration, which is the connective layer. It's what turns 4 channels into one system. The earned media placement that drives to the owned media asset on your website that gets distributed through shared media and amplified by paid, all organized around a single thesis. This is the layer that produces the alignment that 84% of CMOs say they can't get. You don't align people with a vision statement. You align them with a system that makes the connections obvious. And then measurement is how you earn respect back. You will walk back into the quarterly results room with channels integrated. When they're integrated, you can measure the entire machine, not the blog post got X views, but this thesis run through the full system, produce this pipeline and this authority. You can show near-term proof and long-term compounding in the same report. That's what earn influences back. It's not a braver argument, it's a better instrument. Look at that list again, and then look at the Lippincott findings. Low influence, no alignment, can't prove value, defunding the wrong things. Every single one is what happens when you run channels without a system. The influence problem and the integration problem are the same problem, which is good news because it means you only have to solve one. So what do you actually do? Well, stop trying to win the brand versus performance debate. You can't, and it's costing you the room. Start auditing your marketing as a system instead of a set of channels. Where does owned media connect to earned media? Where does earned drive to owned? Is shared describing your best work, or is it just chasing trends? Is paid amplifying something that's already proven, or is it carrying the whole load? And can you measure the machine or only the parts? If the honest answer is we have great channels and no system, that's not a failure. It's the most common state of marketing today, and it's exactly what the Lippincott data has measured. It's also the most fixable thing on your plate because the pieces are already there. They're just not connected yet. The CMOs who will have influence a year from now aren't the ones who argue better. They're the ones who are running a system. And this, by the way, is the work that we certify individuals in and the work that we train internal teams to do. The PESO model certification exists to turn a pile of channels into an integrated system, the kind that produces near-term proof and long-term authority from the same work and gives you something to measure when you walk into the C-suite. Not sure where your organization stands or if you need help? You can start with the free PACEL model diagnostic. It scores how integrated your marketing and communications actually are. It's free, and you can take it as often as you'd like. Or just email us. We're happy to talk you through where the connective layer is breaking down and what it'd take to fix it. I would love to have that conversation with you because I love to fix things and I'd love to give you more influence so that you can go into the C-suite and measure to your heart's content and get all sorts of accolades for it. The data already told you you have an influence problem. The fix is an operating system. If you would like to learn more about how to install the PACEL operating system into your work, join us in the SpinSucks community. It's a great place to get advice, brainstorm ideas, and build real relationships with your peers. You can find us at spinsucks.com/community. That's spinsucks.com/community. And make sure you follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram. We're posting tips, how-tos, cheat sheets, and more every week. I'll see you next week. Bye.